Welcome to Mastery Path Connections. I'm Debra Sofia Magdalene, and today I am delighted to be having a chat with Thelma. This is Thelma Daisy Moeran, who I'm staying with in Glastonbury. And Thelma is such an inspirational lady that I wanted to do an interview with her so that you get an opportunity to find out a little bit about a fascinating life as well. So Thelma, we celebrated your 93rd birthday last Thursday. How does it feel to be 93?
Not much different from being 92.
Good answer. And do you want to just introduce everybody to Yangtze? Something like that.
This is Yangtze, a rare, very ancient crystal skull that came to me in a very strange way. Perhaps I should say at this stage that I'm a highly trained psychic. I trained at the College of Psychic Science and did what they used to call spiritual healing for about 50 years in and around London, as well as trips abroad. So psychic things are not strange to me. And I had the great privilege of connecting with the Mitchell Hedges skull. Many of you will have heard about that skull. Many of you won't. But it is the most incredible skull.
Is this the one in the British Museum? Is this the one in the British Museum, the Mitchell Hedges? No.
No, it's not.
Where's the Mitchell Hedges skull kept?
There are plenty of books on the Mitchell Hedges skull, so I won't try and describe that. But when I first met the incredible skull, it gave me a poem which said, "Happen that we've met before. Come in through the crystal door. You're walking now on crystal floor, something you've not done before." And it seemed as if there was a corridor, like a hotel corridor, with doors either side. And he told me that in door one, amazing grace, and crystals from the floor to the ceiling of every type and colour that exists in the world. It seemed to be a template for all the amazing crystals. And I was allowed to study that for a short while. Then he said, "Come to room 3. This door opens to the past and will be difficult to open." So I took a big breath and gave a big push, and the door opened, and in it, behind the door, first of all there was this big smell of antiquity, and then I noticed that there were shelves, like the wooden shelves you dry apples on. There were shelves all round the room, and there were skulls on the shelves. And I was told, "Look very carefully and choose one for yourself." So I did look very carefully, and I saw this amazing skull. And she was quite easy to recognise. And I said, there she is, that's my skull. And that was it. The session was finished. It was many months later that I had been invited to a crystal conference in Angel Valley in Sedona, in Arizona, and I walked into the big crystal room that they were exhibiting everything, and there on a sheepskin rug with some other ancient skulls was this beautiful skull that I had already seen on a psychic level. And I rushed towards her, picked her up and said, "There's my skull!" to the amusement and embarrassment of the people around. Well, at the time, this skull was being cared for and belonged to a shaman called Gary Butler. And he was also a brilliant carver of crystal skulls. And he recognized that we had a connection. And after the conference was over, a few weeks afterwards, a parcel arrived for me containing the skull and telling me I could keep it for 6 months.
Had Gary told you this before it arrived? Did you know that it was on its way?
I can't remember, because he communicated with Elizabeth on the... I didn't know.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have mattered anyway.
Yeah.
So it arrived in Sedona in a box.
Oh.
And I kept her for 6 months and sent her back.
So during that 6 months, what sort of messages did you get, and how do you communicate with a crystal skull?
Well, in the same way as I communicate with anything, by instinct, by prayer. I don't recall, I do recall if I think hard enough, that she gave me a lot of poetry, and a lot of people handled her and connected with her, and it very quickly became apparent that she could diagnose illnesses.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So in order to do that, would somebody hold her and then she'd communicate that to you?
Yes, usually, yes.
Yeah.
And then I was coming back to England, so I sent her back to Gary. And then, to my surprise, one day in England, she arrived by post. I was rather horrified because I had an enormous amount of duty to pay.
Oh.
Horrified how much duty I had to pay. Because she'd not been declared as a gift or anything.
Oh, no.
And so I kept her for 6 months again. And then it's really very difficult to remember the exact, because I've come and gone and gone and come. It's difficult to remember.
Because you've gone backwards and forwards to Sedona for many years now, haven't you?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. But the first time I went to Sedona was led by spirit. I used to live the other side of Western-super-Mare, and by my bed I had daily readings. And one weekend, I was often guided in the choice of books I was supposed to read. One weekend I was guided to pick up a book in the local library, and it was all about Native Americans and their questing place, Sedona. Well, that seemed to vibrate at me, so I thought, I'll write that down, that's important, and I'll put it on top of the telly. So on top of the telly the word Sedona went, and that weekend I was invited by a young German woman to have lunch with her after the Sunday service. And she suddenly turned to me after lunch and said, "I know where you're going." I said, "Do you?" I said, "Where?" And she said, "Sedona."
Oh, wow.
Yes. So I nearly jumped off the sofa in surprise. And I said, "There's that word again." And she said, she sat and thought for a moment. She said, "Yes, you're going to Coffee Pot Mountain, Sedona." And I laughed. I thought, what a ridiculous name. And left it at that. Well, the next morning when I woke up, I picked up the little booklet of daily readings, and the headline was, "Come to the mountains with me, saith the Lord."
Oh.
Well, there was no denying that. It was like most commands, no please or thank you, a clear command. So I thought, wow, this is the second time this word has jumped up at me. I'll go in the morning and talk to the travel agent. So I trotted along on the Monday morning and said, "Have you ever heard of this place, Sedona?" She said, "I'll look it up." So she looked it up and said, "Yes, there's a plane goes daily from Heathrow. Book me a ticket."
And how old would you have been then, Thelma?
What?
How old were you when you first went?
Ah, no, that's a good point. Well, I've been here 17 years.
Were you
So you can work it out.
in your 70s or 80s? In your 70s, it'd be late 70s?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. That'll do.
Well, that will do,
yeah.
yeah.
About late 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a very brave thing to do.
Yes, I thought it was. But I found there was someone waiting at every changeover point. There seemed to be somebody waiting to help me.
Mm-hmm.
And they took me on to the next spot. And when I arrived at Phoenix, Sky Harbour, I had nowhere to sleep, and everyone was telling me that I couldn't go up into the mountains without being registered at a hotel, because they take you round to your hotel and they can't just drop you in the middle of the mountain. So a very kind lady had just come down from Sedona, and she said, "Oh, I know the perfect hotel for you. I'll ring them up for you." And she booked me a place there and then. And so I hopped on the bus.
and went straight to your hotel.
And went straight to the hotel, yeah. And I was very, very tired. But the next morning, I got up and went to the bus stop, which was only about a minute away, and asked for a $1 bus ride, which put me down in a very exciting area. It was a Spanish area, and all done in Spanish style. And I popped into a shop and thought, this is the right shop, but it wasn't. So I popped out again, crossed the road, and there was a woman with her back towards me, and it was if there was a magnet between us, and she was talking to someone, so I stood back and waited till she finished. Then I went round to where she could see me, and I said quite simply, "I'm being drawn to you." And this was our meeting, my meeting up with Elizabeth Keller. And she had been doing readings, astrological readings, upstairs where she was supposed to be, and she had had an irresistible pull to come downstairs. And this is how we met up. And immediately she said, "You're from England, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "My heart's always in Glastonbury." And I can't remember I can remember, yes. My answer to that was, "Glastonbury?" I've never been there. And she said, "Oh, well, you will come to Glastonbury." "No, I'm not going to that place."
And now you've ended up living in Glastonbury for the last
17
years, yeah. And I love how spirit works, you know, that first of all you took that leap of faith and bought that one-way ticket to Sedona. That takes courage to do that. But also then to go and not have any accommodation but the other side, that's another leap of faith. And I just love how spirit connects people.
Yeah.
You know, about following that calling and being magnetised to people.
It's
Some very, very important messages here, you know, that following your heart and trusting, it can then lead to a knock-on effect, and then you become the custodian, the guardian of Yangtze.
So there we are. Yangtze is very popular and much loved by my friends. The moment they come into the house, they reach for Yangtze. It's not really me they've come to see.
Oh, I think it is.
Although if they're lucky, they get a cup of tea.
Yeah. And just so that you know, Thelma and I connected through Elizabeth Hartstar Keller, because Elizabeth and I met in Glastonbury many years ago, and I'm full-time house sitting and pet sitting at the moment, and Elizabeth connected me with Thelma, and I've been staying with you for the last few weeks, another couple of weeks to go.
Yes.
And it's just a privilege to be here with you, Thelma. You know, we've...
Oh, thank you.
Oh, it really is delightful.
Well, we've had many laughs.
We have, yeah. Thelma thinks I'm very childlike. She said, "When are you going to grow up?" I said, "I never am." No, but I'm learning lots from you, and I also really enjoyed reading your book. This is a book called The Crystal Skull Messenger, which you can find on Amazon. It's been written by Elizabeth Hartstar Keller, Jules Maloney, and Thelma Daisy Moeran. I have to get my accent just right, otherwise Thelma tells me off. But it's a fascinating book about a life, and what really intrigued me when I met Thelma was how her spirituality opened up through her creativity. And you were one of the Bletchley Park girls during the war, weren't you? And
yes.
Can you just tell the story very briefly about
I'll tell you very briefly about it. I'm allowed to tell you now after 30 years of silence. But yes, I was connected with Bletchley Park and did my fair share of intercepting enemy messages, etc. I won't go into it now. But I was also a very naughty little wren, and in order to stay awake, I had one ear plugged into music. I would have been shot at dawn had anybody known, but they didn't know. I had one ear plugged into music, which saved the hearing in this one ear. The other one was plugged into messages and no longer functions. I lost my hearing in this ear. But at night, in order to stay awake, I used to write poetry with my left hand, which is quite difficult. And I've no idea, I couldn't keep and didn't indeed want to keep any of that poetry. But now I will be interested to read it, to know what was in it, because I wrote big sheets, all channel poetry. And then as dawn approached and we were getting ready to go off duty, I simply destroyed it and hoped nobody had seen me writing it.
I'd love to read that poetry now.
Yes, well, it's not there now.
Yeah.
It served its purpose.
But that's a fabulous way of opening up your creativity and, you know, to be like a channel as well. And in the back of the book, actually, there's lots of poems that Thelma's channeled through Yangtze, and they're just wonderful. So Thelma, I'd like to say thank you for allowing me to interview you today.
And I would like to thank you for your happy company that we've shared.
We have. I'm sure we've got lots of more happy moments.
I hope so.
Yeah. If you want to get in touch with Thelma, she's not online. So the best way of contacting her is actually through Elizabeth, probably, isn't it? Yeah. Elizabeth Hartstar Keller. You'll find Elizabeth on Facebook, or through myself, Debra Sofia Magdalene. So lots of love, everybody. If you feel that you're drawn to crystals, to learn more about them, there's lots of resources out there. You know, crystals are amazing things. You know, they hold information and you can access that information.
Just think of your computer that runs on crystals.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Lots of love. Bye.